Joining us from Capitol Hill is Representative Matt Gaetz. He's the Republican of Florida, serves on the Judiciary and Budget Committees, a member of those committees. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
You've recently called on the president on the topic of declassifying documents. Describe that call.
Well, we have an application for a FISA warrant against Carter Page that we believe if it is fully made available to the public, we will see serious omissions, information that should have been included in what was presented to the secret court, but that wasn't. That could be a result of prosecutorial misconduct, but it could also demonstrate the bias that we've seen reflected in text messages among members of the FBI. Department of Justice and emails, and then also in the committee testimony that we've brought forward, where we hear people like Bruce Orr, who at one point was the Assistant Deputy Attorney General, who had his wife actually working for the people, getting paid by money that originated at the DNC in the Clinton campaign, and then was shuttling that information into the Department of Justice and the FBI so that it could masquerade as intelligence information to spy on Carter Page. And so we believe that full disclosure and transparency will give the American people the opportunity to evaluate whether or not this was an appropriate beginning to the investigation.
What is it in those documents that lead you to believe that you're going to find that type of information?
Well, it's what's not in the documents, actually. It's the fact that we do not believe there'll be information about the origins of the dossier, about the individuals who wrote the dossier, or now, based on the interviews we've recently done of Bruce Orr in the Judiciary Committee, the information about the people who had spousal relationships within the government who were getting paid money to write bad information about Donald Trump. So the fact that none of that information was presented to a secret court that had the authority to issue warrants to spy on Americans is the information we would like in the public square.
Does this lead to a larger effort to discontinue the Mueller investigation overall?
Well, I think it demonstrates the rotten beginnings of the Mueller investigation, but I think that the indictment of the Mueller probe is far broader than would be reflected in just the release of these documents. If you recall the text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, two former individuals who worked on the Clinton email investigation, who worked on the Trump-Russia investigation, and then who worked on Bob Mueller's probe, it reflects a bias that would seem to taint any of the evidence collected, and I think that's the broader indictment.
Within the body of investigations going on, there's various inspector generals looking into this. What do you think about their effort looking into it, and how much value do you place on that?
So there are two tracks of the inspector general's inquiry. The first relates to whether or not the FBI had an inappropriate media leaking strategy, where instead of collecting evidence and making prosecutorial decisions, you had people at the FBI who were trying to influence public opinion by getting information into press stories. The other concern about that is that when we fully look at the applications for intelligence collection, it appears that the FBI would leak stories and then cite those stories as a basis to validate other investigative work. That's circular logic. That sets up a tautology where something is merely because it is. The other track, the second track, is that Inspector General Michael Horowitz has indicated that there may have been media companies inappropriately providing tickets to concerts and sporting events, dinners, and other gratuities to people who were at the FBI in order to get those leaks, in order to be able to have stories and information. And so the ecosystem of corruption, where you have improper leaking to influence public opinion and then improper gifts potentially to the FBI, is an important thing to investigate. I don't think we should draw any conclusions until we see the Inspector General's report, but certainly it's something that we're eager to receive on Capitol Hill.
Do you have a sense that any information or any significant revelation by the Mueller investigation will happen before the November elections?
It's very difficult to tell. I think if you look at what we've got so far, it's pretty de minimis. You've got some ghost indictments against some Russians that are never going to show up. You had George Papadopoulos spend 14 days or he's going to spend 14 days in prison as a result of a pretty insignificant misstatement to the FBI that didn't have anything to do with the president. And then you have Paul Manafort convicted of tax crimes that emerged decades before Donald Trump even contemplated a run for the presidency. So if that's the full sum of information we have today, nothing seems to indicate that there's some bombshell before the midterms, but as the president likes to say, we'll see.
Even as you talk about that, Paul Manafort possibly talking a plea deal, where does that, or how does that register
Well, those arise from some of the very same facts that really predate Donald Trump's interest in the presidency. If Paul Manafort were being prosecuted for collusion with the Russians during his role as the chairman of the Trump campaign, I think we'd have a far different view. But, you know, right now we're in this very dangerous place where we're investigating people rather than investigating crimes. Here it appears as though they're trying to gain as much leverage as they can against Paul Manafort, with the hopes then that they can craft his testimony against other people associated with the Trump organization. It remains to be seen whether that'll be successful.
Representative Gaetz, when it comes to the November elections, do you think that this round of elections will be a direct referendum on President Trump?
I think midterm elections are always a referendum on the party in power. I think that Republicans have a great record of success to run on, the longest consecutive streak of job creation in America's history, some of the lowest unemployment rates in history, resetting the trade balance so that we put America first. I think the president has delivered on the economic promises, the bold economic promises he made. And if the election's about the economy, I think Republicans will do very well. If it's about a lot of the other drama and intrigue and sort of circusry that surrounds Washington, I think that it may be a less favorable.
See the rest of this discussion online at cspan.org. The House Foreign Affairs Committee today is considering legislation requesting the White House and Secretary of State turn over all documents and records regarding the meeting this year between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. This hearing getting underway